Hello and welcome to After Scientology, Straight Up and Vertical, the weekly show where Tony Ortega and I get together and go over the week's events in the world of Scientology. Hey, Tony, welcome back to this show.
Hey, I apologize for last week. I had an equipment issue. I got it taken care of. We're back to it.
Back to it. That's right. And we are going to cover something from last week as well as this last week that we're in, as we usually do. That kind of thing. So let's start off with the big hot stuff is Alex Barnes-Ross, the UK protest in the against the IAS event at St. Hill. What's the latest and greatest on all of this? What happened?
You know, he's just done another great job. I love watching him and the other protesters on their live feed because they have such great signs. Yes. They have such clear messages. They're not screaming at people. They're not trying to make people uncomfortable. They want people to be confronted with the fact that Scientology has this history of abuse, and they're doing it in a really responsible way. And you know, he had the experience of last year about what were some of the ways Scientology tries to keep protesters from being seen by Scientologists. And so he was able to circumvent some of that working with police. But even with all the work he's done with them to make sure that they had the right to stand in a certain place, Scientology still came up with some games where they had set up some barriers and they were using umbrellas and they were claiming that a public strip of land was privately owned. I mean, you know, to me, Chris, the thing is, I don't really, maybe you could help me understand this because I don't understand, because, you know, when you see them protesting, they're standing on the side of the road. They got these great signs, but people are just driving by on their way to this event. Why is Scientology so afraid of some Scientologists happening to see these people on the side of the road? Are they really this paranoid that just glimpsing Alex, you know, former London staffer Alex Barnes-Ross and Bonnie Woods and some other people on the side of the road with these signs is going to be enough to, you know, counteract all the training they've had and all the, you know, years of, I mean, it's really funny to me that Scientology seems to really worry about a kind of protest that other organizations, other political movements endure is not a big deal all the time. What do you think it is that makes Scientology so rabid about this?
Oh, I think it's a few things. It's a great question because I think it has to do with their shrinking influence and shrinking numbers. And I think that they are getting more desperate and have been for years. And that it feeds over into exactly what we're seeing with this. The other thing, of course, is their principle of no end theta. And this is a term in Scientology for bad news, rumor mongering, you know, bad PR about Scientology or anything they would consider, quote unquote, harmful lies about Scientology. This falls under N theta. And yes, it is a thing to not have the regular Scientologists getting bad news, N theta, you know, on their lines, as they put it, and driving right by a protest is what they consider that. They think also that Scientology is actually having a much wider and broader and bigger influence on the world than it really is. They are constantly fed a stream of lies. So that protest tells them, not with everybody, not everybody's on your side. And that's a constant reminder. And there is nothing that David Miscavige hates more than somebody contradicting his themes and his messages right at the event where he's giving them.
Right.
So these three things coming together probably mean that there's a ton of pressure right from the top with Miscavige. Get this handled.
Right.
I want it gone.
Well, and
they do what they do to make that happen.
This year, in particular, one of the things that we were looking for was that Scientology is now trying to get the local government to create a special legal zone that would make these kinds of demonstrations illegal for at least the next 3 years. Yep. So there were observers there to watch what was going on. And my concern was I was afraid maybe some agents provocateur would show up and, you know, try to cause trouble. But it sounds like Alex had things under control. He said the police could see that the only sort of issues that were coming up were being caused by the Scientologists, not the protesters. So now I think it's going to be a little tough for the city council or the district council to come back and say, this is really disruptive and it didn't disrespectful and it's bigotry. I think, of course, Scientology is still going to claim those things and say that, Alex is out of control. But I think that, it sounds like it's going to be hard for the district council to see it that way. But we'll see.
It's a tough position they're in because they are a group that doesn't want any of this happening, but they have to put on this public image of, but we're conforming, we're complying, and they've never been as under the microscope as they are right now on this. And I think that's why they're playing a little nicer. And even when they're playing nicer, we see the nonsense they get up to, as Alex described. So it's a push-pull for them, because they do have a long game. And that long game's been working up until very recently. So I think they're still shuffling around trying to figure out what exactly do we do about this, Right. And I think Alex taking the moderate, safe, conservative route on this with the great signage and the great protesting is exactly the right move, because it does give them no excuse to take him out or take out that protest movement.
Now, as for what was going on inside, this is the 40th anniversary of the International Association of Scientologists, Scientology's membership organization. Friday night is when Dave gave his big speech about how great everything's going in Scientology and recognizing the Freedom Medal winners. Saturday night is when they had their patrons ball. And yes, Tom Cruise was in attendance, as the photos show that I posted on my Substack. And so we know he was there. I don't know yet about other celebrities. We're getting more and more photos every hour now coming out of that place. But, that's, I think, interesting, because I knew last year they definitely wanted to make a point that Cruise was still in, because the Daily Mail had made all this noise about him possibly leaving like they do. So I wasn't sure if he'd come this year, but he did. So Dave, mission accomplished for Dave, I guess.
Yeah, basically, because it's a constant reminder that, one of the most powerful celebrities in the world is on stage or on board with David Miscavige. So it makes sense Dave would want that. I'm wondering what other celebrities may have been there as well, as we'll maybe figure out as the photos and stuff come out. This is the big one for Miscavige now. And it makes sense that it is, because over the years, the International Association of Scientologists has become more and more and more of the focal point of Scientology as a movement. All the money goes there. And if not to these renovating, these buildings. And that's it. That's where most of the money for that organization is being generated from, not from their services and their books and stuff. So this is really Miscavige's cash cow and has been for 40 years now. He's the one who invented this. This didn't come from Hubbard. Right. So this is now the mainline yearly event for Scientology, it seems, which is the greatest one to protest. So,
yeah.
But that's probably why Cruise shows up, where he's not going to show up to the other events necessarily.
Well, I think also he has lived in England, so he's been living there, and so that's kind of a local thing for him, and it's his way of showing support for Dave. Travolta lives in Florida, so the one he tends to go to is the LRH birthday party in March.
Right.
LA, I don't know. That's you'd think that would be the celebrity central when the New Year's Eve in New York in LA, but the only real celebrity I saw this last year was Erica Christensen and possibly Juliette Lewis this past New Year's. There was a person in the crowd that looked a lot like her, but I couldn't swear to it. Right. But at this point, it's Travolta, because he really honors Hubbard more than Miscavige, and that's the LRH birthday event in March in Florida. And then Cruise and Miscavige are together at the IAS in October.
Yeah, it makes sense. It especially makes sense also, just to add this, is for those who don't know, if you want to go back and Google Tom Cruise turtleneck video, that video was presented at an IAS event for Tom Cruise specifically. So, IAS is big for him.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we had some other stories to cover, and one of them being really quite disturbing was this Scientology school cover-up. The Delphi school had a predator. What was this whole thing?
Yeah, this was a story several years ago, and it was actually about a non-Scientology school in Santa Clarita, north of Los Angeles. A basketball coach was sent to prison for abusing 6 boys. But then what made the story even worse was it came out that before he had been at that Santa Clarita school, he had been at a Scientology school in Lakeview Terrace, a Delphi Academy school, and he was caught messing around with a boy there. But rather than turn him in, they recommended him when he moved to the Santa Clarita school. So so again, he was put in prison, I don't know, 7 years ago. He's got a 17-year sentence. But what's happening now is that a law firm has filed a lawsuit on behalf of a John Doe student at the Scientology school, because the Scientology school is still there. The Santa Clarita charter school is gone, but the Scientology school is still there. So the lawsuit is going to focus on the abuse of this boy and how the school not only did nothing about it, but recommended him when he moved to the other school and then abused 6 more boys. So it's a really bad story. It's just the lawsuit was just filed this week. The law firm put out a press release about it. I have not seen a response yet from the school. Of course, the question's going to come up. It'll be interesting to see how the press covers it, whether they'll say the school has ties to Scientology, because this is the Delphi Academy is part of a network of schools that are headquartered at the Delphian, the expensive boarding school in Oregon, all of which operates under the auspices of ABLE, Association for Better Living and Education, which is staffed only with Sea Org members. I mean, there's just no question this is Scientology.
Yeah.
But because there is that, slight remove, I don't know that Miscavige is going to dispatch his best lawyers on this. We'll see when we get some response in the next few weeks.
Yeah, for sure. We'll have to make those connections pretty solid for this in order for Miscavige to get involved directly, for sure. But the story is horrifying. And the idea of, it's reminiscent of, Spotlight kind of stuff. We're just going to transfer this guy off, right? And that's just disgusting, especially because it was noted in the filing that the person who ran the Delphi school, Karen Dale, knew.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like she didn't know, right? And that's what's being asserted, at least in the lawsuit. So it'll be interesting to see how this moves forward and what she has to say about her actions.
Right.
Scientologist, of course. All right. Rebecca Minkoff. I thought it was worth talking about this one just because so many people are going to watch this stuff. So what do we have on the latest of her statements about Scientology on this show she's on?
Well, so Rebecca Minkoff, the well-known handbag designer, lifelong Scientologist, daughter to David Minkoff, the quack doctor who was implicated in Lisa McPherson's death back in 1995, and now he's been implicated in another Scientologist death involving a young woman named Whitney Mills. He's being sued in that case. Rebecca Minkoff admitted to Elle Magazine that the reason she's on this reality show, Real Housewives of New York City, is because the pandemic really did a number on her handbag business. And she's, a little bit desperate. And so one way in fashion that you apparently get some more sales is just to get some more press. And so she figured this might be the best way to go about it. And so the way the Real Housewives franchise works is that they have a set cast of like 6 housewives. I don't even know if they're married or not, but they call them that. Right. And that they bring in other people as friends of the cast. And then they just try to get as much intrigue and fighting and catty behavior as possible. And then the next season, some people will stay, some people will go. Well, it was explained to me that when they bring in friends of the cast, they're actually trying out to see if they're going to be a housewife in a future season. So this is a big thing for Rebecca Minkoff. This is essentially a tryout. And sure, right away, she was asked about Scientology by the other one of the other cast members. And I just thought it was interesting that they do this thing in reality TV. It's called a confessional, where after you see the people fight and stuff, then they'll set up an interview specifically with one person to kind of talk about what just happened.
Yeah.
And Minkoff was just, she was so dismissive about being asked about Scientology. She did the classic thing, you want to know more about it, read a book. I mean, that's what they're trained to say.
That's right.
And I didn't expect much from this cast about asking her real questions, but one of them, this woman named Bryn Whitfield, at least was saying things like, "We're not getting answers to our questions. This woman is selling us snake oil." So I give her credit for at least speaking up to that level. But probably the most outrageous thing Rebecca Minkoff said, they were in a helicopter on the way to the Hamptons, and had to explain that to some of our British readers. They didn't know what that was. So, a very exclusive part on Long Island, and wealthy people live there. Anyway, so they're on the helicopter and they asked her about it. And then she says that it's a worldwide accepted religion. There's no secrets and there's nothing weird or whatever. And I'm just like, oh my God. It's like, even the barest research, even Scientologists believe there have to be secrets in Scientology. It's what Hubbard talked about as far as learning on a gradient. You cannot allow Scientologists to know the top level stuff at first. So there's a lot of stuff kept secret, even from Scientologists, let alone the rest of the world. So it's amazing that she'd whip that out, because, it's just such a lie. But I don't know that she's going to get pressed on that very much. Andy Cohen, the producer of the franchise, was hinting that there might be some more coming up later in the season to kind of confront her about that. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but it's kind of fun.
It is, and it's always the bald-faced, bold lies that they're willing to tell on such a big public window, right? Where they have so many people watching. They're just trying to, no. There's no controversy, nothing to see here. Nothing to see here is what they are constantly trying to do. But to say that there's no secrets. I mean, you walk into any search of Scientology anywhere, anyone can do this, and look at their grade chart, their bridge to total freedoms. Great big chart. It says confidential on half of that chart. You can't know what's on half of it the day you walk in until you've paid something like $100,000, $200,000 to even get to those confidential levels. So it is a bold lie for her to say something like that. Anyway, moving. And I actually look forward to her getting pressed on that a little bit more. If she were to become a real housewife, there is no way they're not going to go there. So it'd be interesting to see. I mean, maybe there's a way they wouldn't go there, but we'll see. Okay, now last week, the show we didn't do, there was a story that I kind of actually need you to explain it to me a little bit, because I am very confused. Trish Duggan accuses a guy over in Europe of stealing money from her, and now he's in jail. And what happened here?
Well, it's what's so extraordinary about this story is these are two major Scientology donors.
Yeah.
I mean, Trish, of course, is stratospheric. She's the biggest donor of all time. She's a billionaire. She's donated something like approaching $500 million to the Church of Scientology. Nobody comes near her as far as how much she's donated. And Ivan Gaspari was Diamond Meritorious himself. The guy had donated $5 million to the IAS. He's Italian and Swiss. He lives in Italy, lives in Switzerland, and he was a steel trader. He just was a businessman that would move steel between suppliers and manufacturers and stuff, and had done very well for himself. And then in 2016, he moved with his family over to Clearwater, like so many wealthy Scientologists do, so they can be right there. worked closely. They had a reg assigned to him, like wealthy people do,
Yeah.
and they were like constantly pushing him up the next level, and got, like I said, got all the way to Diamond Meritorious, and they were trying to get him to Diamond Meritorious with honors, which would have been $7.5 million, and he was almost
Wow.
there. And I know all this because he was calling me from jail in Lugano, which is the Italian speaking part of Switzerland, where he had been in jail for almost a whole year. And what he said happened was, at some point he was approached by this at one of the events. I think it must have been a LRH birthday, maybe it was something else. And a man named Ozan Osman, I think is his name, approached him and said, we're investors and we're interested in, you've made X number of dollars. How could you make even more? And so they talked about, well, if I had an infusion of cash, I could then scale things up and make even more money. And so they decided they wanted to do that. And then later he found out that this Osman was just representing Trish Duggan, and that Trish Duggan was the actual investor in this new company they created together. And she invested something like $10 million. And he then began operating that and making profits. Now his story is, all of this was set up so that they would create more profits that they could give to the Church of Scientology. And
Mhm.
so after a couple of years, he was mystified that suddenly Trish and her attorney, the infamous Stephen Hayes, um, suddenly moved in and said that they didn't like what he was doing and basically fired him. And he didn't understand why. And then they went to the Swiss authorities and did something you can do in Switzerland that you can't do in the United States. And that is, based on accusations by Trish Duggan and her attorney, Stephen Hayes, that Yvonne had been stealing that money, Switzerland put him in jail without any investigation by police, without any investigation by the DA. There was no indictment, nothing. He was put in jail on a third-party private accusation, and he had been there for almost a year when he started calling me. So I just thought that was amazing for a couple of reasons. First of all, it just never happened in the US, that, it's got to be the DA charging you, not some private person. And also that I thought it was against Scientology rules for one Scientologist to turn in another to law enforcement. What's going on?
Yeah.
So anyway, he desperately wanted the DA to take seriously the idea that this is not just some simple stealing thing, like Trish Duggan says, that this is about making money for the Church of Scientology. So the DA did look into it, or the public prosecutor, I think they call them there, and she did indict him, and there was a trial. It lasted all of 3 days. And it's, again, totally unlike in the United States, where, the accused doesn't have to say a word if they don't want to. The trial opened with the judge personally questioning Yvonne, which actually gave Yvonne the opportunity to tell the judge all about the Scientology stuff. So I know that the defense, they were concerned that the Scientology wouldn't even be allowed in the trial, but Yvonne did get to tell that story. But again, it was directly to the judge. Then the prosecutor spoke for a day, and then the defense spoke for a while, and then the judge issued his verdict. I mean, it was just very,
Hmm.
I don't know, it just seemed very cursory to me. And the prosecutor wanted 7 years for Yvonne. The defense knew that they could tell that there was no question on the judge's mind about guilt and innocence. They asked for 3.5 years, and the judge gave him 5.5. So Ivan Gaspari has now been sentenced to 5 years in prison in Switzerland, at the end of which he will then be banished from Switzerland for 7 years. And which I don't think is too much of a hardship for him. He'll just go back to Italy. I think he prefers to be there anyway.
Right.
So it's just a strange case. I said from the beginning, I don't know if maybe he is guilty of stealing from her. I have no idea. I just think it's so unusual that it's a wealthy billionaire Scientologist accusing another millionaire Scientologist of this, and that Scientology's in the middle of it.
Yeah.
It did get some, after my story came out a couple of months ago. There was some local press in Switzerland. There were reporters there covering it. Very interesting stuff. But I don't know, Chris, the whole thing was just so weird.
Yeah.
And that Trish Duggan was involved in this, and Stephen Hayes. I mentioned the infamous Stephen Hayes. When the Cult Awareness Network caper came down and Scientology bankrupted the Cult Awareness Network, and I know some of your viewers remember that back in the early 2000s,
Yeah.
when Church of Scientology bankrupted the Cult Awareness Network and then went to buy its assets at auction, it was Stephen Hayes they sent down there to buy those assets and pick them up. So he's kind of been dealing with Scientology's dirty work for a long time.
Long time. If it goes back to Can. Wow, that's early 90s.
And I caught him in a lie. He in his interrogation, the prosecutor was asking him, well, Gosbury is saying that this is all because Trish Duggan wanted to set up a company to benefit Scientology, and he was like, Scientologists don't do that. I've never heard of that. That doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, wait a minute, Trish Duggan herself did that a few years earlier with her husband she was with then, when they set up a special foundation to benefit Scientology based on the AbbVie stock that he got and that made him a billionaire. So
Right.
not only is there examples of rich Scientologists setting up companies to benefit Scientology, but that Trish Duggan herself had done it, and here her attorney was pretending that that never happens. So it's the kind of thing where if this was in a U.S. Court, Gosbury's defense attorney would have been all over that and would have been asking Hayes to be cross-examined, but none of that happened in Switzerland. It was this judge asking the questions. Very strange.
Wow. What a window into, obviously foreign justice systems. I mean, I don't know what to say about that except, wow, I'm never living in Switzerland. I mean, I'm sorry, but, if an accusation gets you thrown in jail, forget it. Can you imagine if we put that in place here?
I know. Kendrick Monson would have you locked up in 5 minutes.
Oh my God. The jails would be, I mean, it would look like a wasteland here. Anyway, here's what comes to mind for me is one, it's entirely possible that this guy did steal from Trish or try to or whatever.
Yes.
We have seen the chiropractors, the doctors, the various people who get involved in all the shady dealings. When it comes to high-level, rich Scientologists, there have been no shortage of scandals and crimes. That all being said, though, what I would think is that Trish, being who she is to Scientology, if she even whispered to David Miscavige that I think this guy's ripping me off, that would be it. I mean, if you look at Scientology as a money-making scam, which it is, and that David Miscavige's top priority is that, then where's who's giving the money? Trish Duggan, obviously. It would be the same thing as, if Tom Cruise is walking through Flag and somebody doesn't salute him or something. That person's going to be, washing dishes all night at best. So these top-level guys have kind of power in Scientology that your regular level Scientologist couldn't even dream of.
Right.
And that's quite telling at this level of the rarefied air of Scientology. It's a different setup there. So that's probably really, the simple explanation. Maybe the guy got up to some other shenanigans we're never even going to hear about and he's not talking about. Hard to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. But really interesting story from beginning to end, no matter how you slice it, very strange. Okay, well, speaking of very strange, and to wrap up today, we have this rally at Madison Square Gardens with Donald Trump and Grant Cardone.
Yeah. So, look, it's the end of a bruising political season. I'm sure we're all sick and tired. Look, I voted yesterday. I'm so happy I got it done, taken care of. But they're both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have been focusing on the battleground states, right? Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and just, those are the states that are going to decide the election. But a couple of times, Trump has gone to some places like Montana or California that really aren't battleground states, but he likes to go there. And Kamala herself went to Houston this past week for a special thing. Mm-hmm. But apparently where Trump really wanted to go was Madison Square Garden in New York City. And they finally got things together. And today, Sunday, when we're recording this right now, they're having this rally. at Madison Square Garden. And a couple of days ago, they put out the speakers list. And several people reached out to me and said, "Do you see who's on the list?" Because there's lots of people you would expect, like Don Jr. and Eric Trump and Rudy Giuliani and RFK Jr., that kind of thing. But and then also like cultural figures, so like Dana White from the UFC, and some music, some musicians and things like that. But one of the people on the list is Grant Cardone.
Hmm.
And Cardone has had Trump on his 10X events before, and Cardone has been very loyal to Trump. Like, for example, in February, when Trump was hit with that $355 million court judgment for the Trump organization's fraud conviction, Elena Cardone started a GoFundMe that raised like $1 million in the first week to try to offset the penalty. And Grant Cardone announced that he was no longer going to do any real estate business in New York. So they have proven themselves to be really super loyal to Trump. And that kind of explains why maybe he's on the list of folks at the event. But I don't know. Only 8 days out from the election, you have a Scientologist on stage. Politicians from both parties have been pretty careful in recent years to stay away from Scientology. I've seen Republicans just as eager as Democrats not to have anything to do with Scientology, Scientology stain or Scientology figures or anything. So it's interesting that just 8 days after the election, Trump is having this major Scientology donor speaking for him at Madison Square Garden. I've just seen a clip of what Cardone said, and it was just sort of rabid. He called Mark Cuban a simp. He said that Kamala Harris has pimp handlers, and then he called for the slaughter of Democrats. Now, I think he meant it in the sense of, when you slaughter the other team. It's just a phrase you use.
Right.
But it's raised some eyebrows that he used language like that, like, let's kill all the Democrats, or whatever. But it was, I did see the word invalidate. He did use the word invalidate. So I'm gonna take a closer look to see if there are any other Scientology buzzwords that popped up in his address. But I don't know. I just think it's very strange that Trump's people would want a Scientologist on stage at that point. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I think they want their loyal people. And I think that was exactly the right attribute, right? That gets you on stage. Trump loves loyalty. He talks about it all the time. It's a thing with people like him. And I'm not going to get into anything else about him today than that. But on Grant Cardone, the violent rhetoric is a historical thing. I remember, or I'm thinking to the story where you wrote about the history with Milton, the Castellas? Yeah.
Castellas.
Yeah, Castellas, yes, where he talked about, being a sniper and that kind of thing, right? Cardone's always had this tough guy, Miscavige kind of aura to him. I mean, I met him. He's very much a Miscavige.
He's Miscavige sized, right?
Yeah, he is. And he's stocky and muscular, and he's really full of himself. And fine, he's got a big ego, but his Scientology is really shows. And he's not the only Scientology donor on that side of the political fence. Scientologists love Trump. So there's that. The other thing I wanted to throw out, though, about this is in terms of the sort of interesting part about this is, in all the years I've been watching Trump and him on social media and whatnot, the only time I've seen MAGA turn on him was when he retweeted Joy Vila years ago, when she was aspiring to get up into Trump's orbit. She got real close. And now Grant Cardone is speaking on stage at a Trump event. This is clearly a setup to get a Scientologist into the White House, not in an official position, just in a friendly position. And let's get the ear of the president. And Grant Cardone is actually pulling that off as far as Scientology is concerned. Whether he's really doing it or not, I can't say. But from Scientologist point of view, he's a hero right now.
And Trish Duggan has donated even more to the Trump campaign than Grant Cardone is, but she's not a speaker. She's not a speaker. So his thing is social media and speaking, and so But Trish Duggan's donated even more, something like 5 million to Trump hacks. Yeah.
Yeah, they're getting a lot of money from Scientologists, no doubt about it. Okay, well, interesting story. Just more, for the political grist, I guess you could say, for the season we're in. But yeah, I'll be glad when this is over. Okay, so that was our last 2 weeks, really, in the world of Scientology that we wanted to go over with y'all. I hope you found this entertaining, informative, and educational as always. Tony, any previews for what's coming up this week?
I already gave you one. Tom Cruise was at the IAS. There you go. There's your little scoop right there.
There we go. Excellent. All right, good, folks. Check out Tony's blog, as I say, every week. The address is right there. The link is right there on the screen in front of you. And get your daily notifications, subscribe, all of that, and then check back in with us on Mondays for the weekly summary. I will be taking November as a hiatus month. I'm not doing anything except this show. So tune in every Monday. You'll still get the Scientology rundown. All right, guys. See you next week. Bye-bye.